personal protection options for those living under tyrannical governments that ban or restrict guns, knives, and pepper spray. Hello and welcome to the channel. This is The Art of Prepping. Been getting a lot of comments, a lot of requests to do a video like this over the last 2 weeks, and so I decided to go ahead and do the video now. This is coming from, mostly European countries, also from Australia, and a few other places that have major restrictions or total full-out bans on firearms in general. Some of these countries have the ability to carry like maybe single-shot shotguns or single-shot rifles or muskets, but for the most part, it's pretty much you have to jump through so many hoops and pay so many fees and do these certain procedures and red tape that it's almost non-existent, the gun ownership in these countries. In terms of knives, some of them have restrictions of 2-inch or 3-inch blades. Some of them are just not allowed to have any. And in terms of pepper spray, I was a little bit surprised that there's that many restrictions on pepper spray. But the more I look throughout Europe, there's definitely pockets of areas that that restrict it. So that's very tyrannical. So apparently, your governments are not trusting of the people. And the people are not allowed to defend their lives. So their lives must not be worth much according to their government, which is hogwash. And so as you know, I don't like tyrannical governments. I certainly don't like the European Union. And I certainly don't like a lot of these socialist types of countries that are popping up all over the place, especially the governments within the European Union. And certainly don't like the Australians' government at all. I love the Australian people, but their government sucks. And so with that, I will also have to address the states here in the United States in particular, and I'm not going to go through the whole list because there's actually more than I wish to care for to even say, but states like California or those becoming like California here in the United States that have a lot of tyranny and have major gun restrictions all over the place, and even in a lot of places what they can carry in terms of what size blades and all that crap. And so this is for those individuals. This is a large swath of the earth. This is what's so sad about this. I mean, you would think that personal protection would be like one of your basic, like a global rights, like a human right. And it is. It still is a right. It's just that not all governments recognize it. And that's why they're tyrannical. Now, I have a long list of things that I've been compiling over the last few hours. I've been doing things around the homestead, and so I kind of, every few minutes, I get a new one in my head, and I write it down. And so I've been chewing on this for a little bit, and hopefully this is not a list that will give you everything, but hopefully this will be a list that will give you a great amount of options for those that are pretty much tied and restricted to the point that you feel like that you're helpless, but you're really not. You're just at a disadvantage because, as we all know, the criminals don't abide by the rules. The criminals have the blades. The criminals have the firearms, and the criminals don't obey the laws. So it doesn't matter what the tyrannical governments say that you can't have. The criminals, by definition, are not going to abide by those laws. So the governments don't really care, but they're not even trying to make you safer. This is all just a move through emotions to push through and to gain more control over you because, once again, they're tyrannical. And they probably have connections with the New World Order and God knows what else. Let's just hope that all ends soon and freedom and prosperity comes about. But the way it looks like it, I don't think it will happen like that. It'll probably have to have another world war or global conflicts, regional conflicts that will go on for decades, maybe before we can start to turn the tide on this. But that's not the topic of this video. It's personal protection options for those living under tyranny. So the first one will be your keys. Now, some of these are things you've heard about, but maybe not in the ways that you've known. Keys can be obviously put in your hands, in between your fingers and your knuckles, and they can be thrusted out like a kind of like a stab punch. They can be raked across the face. If you're going to do that, go for the eyes, go for the throat, go for the temples, go in the ear, go in the nose. I would avoid the mouth area just because they could bite you. They could do a lot of things. You don't even know they might have a disease, and you don't want to get your hand partially lodged in their mouth while you're striking. You can also, grab and thrust into their groin area or their kidney areas. But obviously, you really don't want to use your keys as a fighting method For one, they might not be very sharp and they might be blunted. Number two, you're too close to the attacker. You should never want to get that close. Your main goal for defense here is to create distance between you and the attacker. For all I know, you might be like a 100-pound individual and the attacker is 300 pounds and they have the strength of 3 or 4 times of you, and they could easily overpower you, no matter if you even know like martial arts or not. There is this laws of physics that it's going to be hard to overtake certain people just due to size. So you don't ever want to really fight anyone, even if someone looks like they're smaller and less strong. Once again, they may have specialized knowledge to overtake you as well. So you just don't want to play that Russian roulette. The next thing is Kubaton. Now, I'm not even for sure if this is legal in a lot of places. I kind of would think it would be. It doesn't even have to look like a traditional Kubaton. It could just be anywhere from 4 to 6 inches is kind of the average size. I think on the upper end, they might be up as much as maybe 6.5 to 7 inches. But basically, it's just like a dowel rod. I mean, you could get a dowel rod, or sometimes they come in metal, sometimes they come in plastic, or it's like a real hard, dense polymer plastic, though. It's not like a injected molded plastic. Sometimes it's fiberglass, but whatever it is, it typically is between like around 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch wide, and it has knurling or some kind of grip pattern, and you can grab it. It's usually attached to your keys, and you can flail the keys in the face of the person, or just use the actual Kubaton when you grab it and get a full hand of it and strike into pressure points, into the eyes, soft tissue of the body, especially in the face. So that's another option. But once again, you're getting real close to that individual. As we go through this, there'll be off and on things that'll be close contact and far, things that you can actually stand off, and it'll actually open up more distance. So we're going to kind of, play with that back and forth as we go through the list. Now, once again, I don't really think that this would be banned. I mean, it's called something different in your country, but here it's called wasp spray. And it's basically like a bug spray for like hornets and wasps and other types of really nasty little insects that bite. And so if that's allowed in your area, then that could be something. Some of those have actually like 18-foot projected sprays, especially if you're in a non-windy environment, especially like in your house, and there's no wind. Man, you could launch that sucker across the room and spray that person in the face. And from what I gather, what I've heard, and some of them are worse than others, but it's a horrendous burning sensation in the mouth, eyes, ears, nose, and those kind of things. So it could be, a makeshift type of pepper spray. It may not be as potent, but once again, it can definitely distract and keep them away just for a little while so you can get away from them. The next is bear spray. Now, if in your area, pepper spray is banned, I'm pretty sure probably bear spray. But I did look, and some places are, they allow it in limited ways, especially if you are, legitimately camping and doing things. And so you may be able to own that because you've actually have the uses and the need for it because you do those activities. Just like in some countries, you're able to and you're allowed to have certain firearms only if you're like a rancher and you have so many like acres and blah blah blah. It's just tyranny at its best. But I would look into it. A bear spray would be one heck of a tool. That's like pepper spray on steroids. But I kind of have a feeling that in some places that's either extremely restricted or banned outright. Now, these are things that pretty much everyone would have, or at least I hope these are not banned in your area. Once again, I'm no expert legally in all these European countries or in Australia, Canada, and even California and other tyrannical states in the United States. The only thing I know is that some of these things should be more common than others. At least I'd hope they would be, and that would be tools from your toolbox. It could be your screwdriver, your hammer, in either side of the hammer, the nail puller or the actual impact side. They would both be very devastating. Once again, some of these items on this list not only are just non-lethal, but they could be lethal. I mean, if you went far enough with them, and you'll see what I'm saying. So hammers, and there's all kind of hammers too. Roofing hammers, all kinds. So you got hatchets, you got pry bars. You got long nails. I mean, there's like some 6 to 8 inch, nails that are some stout nails, no doubt about it, for heavy duty type of building construction or even fence making and building that, man, you could grab on that nail. And I mean, that is literally like a shiv. You could even sharpen the end of a nail to, a very fine point. It would give you a massive puncture. Same thing goes with sewing needles. or crochet needles. You can get the real heavy metal ones, and that could really puncture good. Okay, the next thing would be, so we got long nails, we got axes, sharpened shovels. Don't discount shovels, especially those smaller ones, like the military collapsible shovels. If you sharpen the edges on that sucker, and I don't know if that's illegal or not, I don't think it would be, but once again, I don't know your laws, man, you can sharpen to a really, really sharp edge, and you could fight with that. You could have, I mean, that's a pretty freaking big blade, and you could and that's very small and compact. I mean, it'd be more compact than a machete, and it'd be like that would be a very good tool. Okay, so after that, it would be like long, heavy types of flashlights. Now, these would be like long, like mag lights, the metal ones. The real heavy, kind of like the aircraft aluminum, or even the solid metal ones. If you have those, like the 3 or 4C or 3 or 4D, I mean, they even have, I think at one point, Maglite made like up to a 6D, I think. 6D battery. I mean, that thing was ridiculous. Very heavy, pretty much impractical. But if all you had was a big flashlight, a massive flashlight like that, next to your bed and someone broke in, man, that could be one heck of a baton. And you could actually kill someone with that. Of course, you wouldn't want to try to do that, but you could definitely put them down. You could even just go for their knees first, or hit them in the chest to stun them, and then man, you could break bones. The next thing would be in your kitchen. Look around your kitchen, see what's there. Your rolling pins, your cutlery. And once again, I don't know what kind of restrictions for cutlery when it comes to kitchen, in countries, but I've heard that you can't even buy certain kitchenware unless you're a certain age, and I mean all kinds of restrictions. So it's not just what kind of pocket knives you can carry; it's other blades too. And so I think in some places you can't even buy machetes or nothing anymore. Pretty tyrannical. Also, kitchen scissors or shears. Man, those things can be devastating. Not just in the open position, but as a stabbing tool. Some of them have very sharp tips. Some of them are more blunted, so you have to check them out. The next thing would be in other places of your house. It could be candlesticks, lamps, like the stems of the lamps. You could just tear off the actual part with the bulb part on it, or unscrew it and just use the actual stem of it, or the post. And once again, I don't know about baseball bats. Even some countries don't even have baseball per se as a sport, but they have like small clubs or various forms of the American traditional game called baseball. And we have baseball bats, and our bats are made up of typically 3 materials. You got the wood, which is kind of the classic material. You got kind of like the aluminum bats, which a lot of intramural sports and clubs use those as well. And you have some that use this. It's a fiberglass type resin or a polymer resin bats. Not so common though, but they're around. And of course, you do also, in terms of the metal, once again, you have also just the traditional, like the heavier metal alloys they're not so much aircraft aluminum or aluminum based, but they're other metals. And so that could be an option. If you have a baseball bat of any size, would probably be a pretty decent little item to have. You could also use 2x4s. Man, if you get hit by a 2x4 in the face, that could knock you out. And it could be even worse if you drive nails or screws and they come out the other end an inch or two. And so now you have like a spike bat by a 2x4. Man, that could be illegal though in your area, but check into it. Even if some of this is illegal, at some point though, if the SHTF or shit hits the fan or an emergency disaster situation happens, and local law enforcement is definitely not there to help you. Of course, your government is not there to help you anyways because they disarmed you, so they don't really care. But if you're trying to be law-abiding and you don't have any of this stuff, makeshift already, but something really bad happens and the government can't even protect its people or even respond to anything, then I'd be making anything possible to keep people out of my house, including these 2x4s with nails driven through there, and I'd have several of them just ready to go. Okay, next thing, obviously pepper spray and all that stuff is banned in most places, so what we have here is you can make your own. Now, of course, this may be illegal during rule of law, but if there's WROL without rule of law, you might have to create your own pepper juice. And so you could take hot pepper juice in concentration, make your own solution. Put it in spray bottles. It could be the kind that you use to water your plants. It could be just in bottles, squeeze bottles that can shoot out liquid. You have to figure out whatever is the best delivery system, but you could make your own pepper spray in a sense. Now, going back to flashlights, now instead of using it as a billy club or a baton or a baton, depending on where you live, you could also use it to strike with in terms of the actual bezel itself. And what I mean by that, there's a lot of the heads of the flashlights on the ends. They have a special crown, and it's called a crenulated bezel, and it's a serrated bezel. Now, that may be illegal in your country. I don't know, but I haven't really heard much of restrictions on those. And so some of the flashlights it's removable. So you can actually have the smooth, the smooth head or the actual tip there of the flashlight for the actual crown, or you can put that on, the actual crenulated bezel. And that could be a very devastating, impact tool. And so that's one option. Also on the flashlight itself, besides the extremely bright output on some of the newer flashlights and the LED, if you get hit by, especially in a dark environment, you get lit up by 500 to 1,000 lumens right in your face, even at 50 to 100 feet away. That's going to be very, very blinding. You won't have any night vision. That person's going to be pretty much vulnerable for probably 2 to 5 minutes at the least. Just, by the time he's trying to get reoriented. And it's even more devastating when you have the strobe mode. And, the 60 hertz, that kind of range, that frequency of strobe is very good to mess with people's eyes, especially for the human eye. So just keep an eye on that. Broom handles, shovel handles, garden hoe handles, or even the garden hoe itself. These handles could be used as impact weapons. The garden hoe, of course, the hoe itself can be sharpened in a very razor sharp edge and used as an attack weapon. The pitchfork, obviously, without being said, you can sharpen those to a brutal tips and attack with those. The sickle, if that's allowed in your area, man, oh man, the sickle is devastating. And the lawnmower blades, if you have an old lawnmower blade, if that's even allowed I would hope that you have lawnmowers. I don't know about in some countries, but if like in America, you can just go anywhere and buy massive lawnmower blades. And they're just a few dollars. And so then those things are made of like heavy ass, really good quality steel, like tool steel, I think. And man, you could sharpen that stuff up and it's just ridiculous. That would be very deadly. Improvised spears can be made of scrap metals, forks that could be filed down, kitchen knives filed, spoons filed, and they could be tethered and lashed to a pole handle, like a broom handle. Heck, you can even take your broom handle off the actual broom element of itself and just take and sharpen the actual end of the broom handle. You could just whittle that down to a nice spear itself without even adding anything to it. Another idea, now this is, of course, more of a kind of it's preventative to some degree, but it's actually, if you don't think you can protect yourself and you're just trying to get attention, one idea would be like in a personal alarm. Now, this isn't going to give you actual protection. Now, some people, and of course, depending on what the alarm is, it could be so loud that it could really jack with your hearing. And some people will not want to mess with you because it's like, oh, God, you're getting too much attention, plus it's hurting my ears. But they have some very, very loud personal alarms now, better than they did a couple years ago. Might want to check into them. Rolled up newspapers. Now, this sounds like it wouldn't work at all, but if you have a pretty thick newspaper, tight, rolled up really, really tight, try it yourself. A really, really tight newspaper, and even take zip ties or tape it yourself with like Gorilla tape or duct tape, and tape that thing so there's no give. That thing is super solid. You hit someone with that, you'll know it. It'll leave a bruise. Now, that could be an actual improvised weapon. Now, the next thing would be, okay, now this is something that I'd have to say that it's kind of controversial because you may not have this available, but if you are in an environment and you have nothing else, this is kind of bad. Before you go to hand-to-hand combatives, before we'll get to that in just a moment, that you might want to look in your environment and see what's available in the environment. Now, for example, you could use dirt, coins, rock, sand, it could be mud. These things can all be thrown. It could be anything you have really thrown in the person's face or just thrown in the path just to distract them and slow them down. And so it's something to consider. And also when you're talking about other kind of things that you may have on your person, look at the things that are very common that may be overlooked and that aren't so suspicious, such as like a walking stick, a cane, or a hiking pole. Especially like if you're out hiking a lot and you have those trekking poles for stability. Some people use one, some people use two. But those are pretty strong. They come in like carbon fiber, fiberglass. Some of them are aircraft aluminum and so forth. They may not be the best option. Probably be better to have a walking stick, like a traditional wood staff, or a cane. It's like a metal cane, man. Now that would be pretty freaking devastating, especially if you picked it up and held it by the bottom and used the actual curvature handle part to strike. That could jack you up, break a bone even. So some other things that I thought about at the end here: a whistle, once again to get attention, and maybe the whistles nowadays, like the windstorm and the storm whistles made by Storm Safety Whistle Company. They're devastatingly loud. I mean, they will literally burn your ears. I have the windstorm, which is the second loudest whistle in the world. I mean, it's no joke either. It's so flippin' freaking loud that it is not something you'd even want to use without hearing protection, and that's no joke. I mean, if you think some of the upper levels are the best, because I have almost the complete series of Fox 40 whistles, and they are awesome. But the man, I'm telling you, people, and it's even sometimes it's cheaper to get the storm whistles, and the storm whistles are, man, they were tremendous. They kind of make the Fox 40 whistles look a little bit cheesy in terms of the output. I don't even know how that works. But they've got the science down. There's actually a doctor that made this. I think he was an engineer or something. Man, he is amazing. These whistles are ridiculous. I mean, mine's the second loudest. I mean, can you imagine? I don't even know what the loudest would probably be almost too loud. I mean, that would actually damage your ear. And so, I mean, this is some serious whistles. So whistles is no joke, but once again, it's not going to be physically deterring the other person besides making their ears bleed out almost. I mean, almost literally, but it could be a serious deterrent. But once again, you're blowing air into it, and I don't know. It's one of those things, though, when you get distance from someone, you may want to use it, or if you have enough time to react and you see someone coming, blow it a few times, and then prepare for if you have to use combatives, which is going to be our next thing, which should be one of the last things you use. And I'm telling you what, this is the last resort. You don't want to have hand-to-hand combatives, fighting with your hands or grappling. It's very, very dangerous because you don't know the skill level of the person you're fighting. They could be an expert, fighter, martial artist. You don't even know. You don't know what kind of weapons they have on themselves. You could die immediately in this fight. You want to gain distance. You want to break away. This is just a fact. Now, in America, because we can have handguns, if someone comes up on you and engages like that and your life is threatened, I mean, you could literally shoot them or pull out another weapon and attack back, just to push them back. Because you have a right to, to life and liberty here. That's how we work, at least in most of the states in the United States. So you don't have to sit there and get beat up or potentially killed. You actually have rights here, at least some places you do. And so, especially if you're threatened and your life is threatened, you can push back, And so I try to keep a bubble of at least 3 feet around me at all times when I go in the public. Anybody enters my space, I'm on guard. I'm not going to take that because, it doesn't take almost no time at all for someone to get up on you. So you want to keep some space around yourself. So hand-to-hand combatives, once again, keep distance from yourself, from the other person at all times as much as possible. If you have to strike, go for the vital areas: the throat, eyes, the groin, the knees, the kidneys, the armpits. In terms of other things that you can use to help your hand-to-hand combatives do better, steel-toed boots or shoes. I know that may not be the most comfortable thing to wear. They are a little heavier, but especially for those people who are already into construction, that kind of work or field, you could always use that and do very hard kicks, a lot harder than you would with a regular shoe, and do devastating blows to the body, to the person who is attacking you, the criminal. Now, this is just a couple other little ideas here at the very end, and we'll wrap it up. Metal tent stakes. Now, if you're out camping, for example, and you don't really have anything else with you, and you're putting your tent up or a tarp, you could definitely use that. A decoy wallets and decoy phones. If you're wanting to kind of resolve the conflict and you see that they're not wanting to try to really hurt you or rape you or any of this stuff, they just want your money or resources or your phone, having that decoy phone and a wallet, and I know a lot of my friends do this, not so much the phone part, but the wallet part. My older friends have had enough situations that they've learned And especially if they go in an inner city these days, they typically have always at least one decoy wallet. And so they can just hand over that wallet, and you would have just some real generic cards that have no name on it, or makeshift money. You could even just put some Monopoly money, so at a quick glance it looks like there's something in there, and you can just toss it on the ground and run away. And when they're picking it up and they run the other way thinking that they got your money, they won't know probably until many minutes later, or maybe until they even get home, that they got screwed. So having decoys is a good idea. Now, if they do get your real phone and you don't have a decoy phone and you have to give it up because you feel like you're going to be really harmed, having some type of phone tracking software, even though I don't like tracking stuff, could be an option if you're into that. I think that for me, I'd just go ahead and write it off as a loss, and just have the phone encrypted. That's what I do with mine. Encrypt your phone, and even trying to break those passwords, it's way almost impossible unless you have a real facility, unless you work for like Apple or IBM or something. You're not going to be able to get in there, and so they're screwed, and they just have now a useless phone. And they might be able to sell parts of the phone, possibly maybe the battery for a couple dollars or something, but they're pretty much screwed. So encrypted phones are awesome. And this is just the last two things. Now, if you're in an office environment, with the first one, you could actually have it on your person too. I don't think it'd be illegal in most places. It would be like a metal stout pen. And we're not talking about traditional tactical pens. Now, if you can carry those, that's awesome too. Once again, though, but it's a little overrated, though, the capabilities. But it can be used in many ways, like a Kubaton. It just depends on that particular pen. I have quite a few tactical pens. I hardly ever find myself even carrying them. They're in my EDC bag, but I would admit, though, they're not something you would call like, something I use. I don't find myself just putting them in my pocket. But in terms of like a real heavy metal, pen, it could definitely go for the soft body tissues in the face and throat. That would not be anything out of the question. And the last thing in an office environment, though, and we'll just close it up with this. Thanks for listening to this long spill. Hopefully this was helpful, though. This took me a while to put this together, and I'm very appreciative for all those who listen this long. But this last one would be the metal stapler. That could be a blunt tool, a blunt office tool for self-defense to ram it in someone's face and neck, to even throw it at the person if you had to, just to create a little distance. So these are all makeshift and just different ideas. If you have more, I would love to hear additional ideas. This is by far not the whole exhaustive list of things you can do. I'm sure if I sat there for another couple hours, I could create a whole nother list like this, but this is things that I don't typically think a lot of, just because in the place where I live, I have so many other options that are better. Firearms, blades, pepper spray, Kubatons, and stun guns, and all kinds of cool stuff. And so I don't typically think about this like a lot, but I sure would, though, if I was living in a place that was tyrannical. I'd have every possible means of protection possible, and I don't blame you for asking me all these questions. Thank you for all the questions and all the support, for hitting the like button, for subscribing to the channel. I'll talk to you real soon.